Okay.
What I do there.
And we are live, finally. Apologies, folks. You can probably guess where the technical glitch came from. It is all from my end. Many apologies for starting late, and many apologies to my two guests today, if you like, the wonderful Mr. Ben Cowan and the wonderful Mr. Rob Wolf. Guys, welcome. Yes, apologies for don't quite know what happened there, but hey, better late than never.
That's right.
How are you all doing?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, good. I feel it's
good.
been a pretty good week for crypto, really. I mean, there's been, it's not all been good news, but in general, I feel it's been quite a positive one. We had Bitcoin above 30K. I think ETH has just tipped above 2K. Yeah, there it is, $2,007. So it seems to be a pretty good one as they go. So we do, of course, have lots to talk about. So without further ado, then, shall we just crack on with the first thing that I wanted to talk about? Obviously, before we start, everyone, can I just welcome you all to the stream? Thank you for joining. And if you don't already follow Ben and Rob on YouTube and Twitter and elsewhere, then I highly recommend that you do. Ben is at Into the Cryptoverse on YouTube, and Rob is at Digital Asset News. So please do give them a follow if you haven't already. So today I thought, gentlemen, we would talk a little bit about, I'd like to talk about Bitcoin mining. Rob, I saw you address this in a video on your channel a few days ago. So I thought we could talk a little bit about that. I thought we could also talk briefly about the CPI and the Fed minutes that came out yesterday. I don't think there's a huge amount to say on that, but it'd be good to kind of touch on those briefly. Obviously, Shapella is the kind of big story in crypto at the moment. And thankfully, it seems to be a pretty positive story as well, which is great. It's always nice to have positive things to talk about. And I thought we could also talk a little bit about Asia and also kind of crypto and big tech, kind of following up from that thing last week where where someone discovered that we had the Bitcoin white paper on every sort of Apple Mac from 2018 onwards. Lovely little story. So we'll finish off with that. But let's jump in for a start and talk about Bitcoin and hash rate. And Rob, I'd love you to lead off on this if you could. Like I say, you talked about this in one of your recent videos. Obviously, we saw Bitcoin hit an all-time high for hash rate recently, and this was kind of followed by the news that Russia is now the second biggest Bitcoin miner by country after the United States. So my question, I guess, is Bitcoin mining, is that going to be sort of central to the next arms race? Is this a big deal? Rob, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to everybody. I was not able to take my green screen with me as I traveled from Texas to California. I'm now in Los Angeles, and I just couldn't set it up in time. So there is no pool. It's just some junk room that I'm in. So to answer your question, Guy, about the hash rate, yeah, we hit an all-time high yesterday, a couple of days ago, whatever it was. And I mean, the real question I was thinking about is, how accurate is that when we say that, Bitcoin mining is in Russia, or Bitcoin mining is in Europe, or Bitcoin mining is here? Because you have the mining pools, and that is, the big glutton of all the electrical power and hash rate. But then you have the individual miners that actually plug in. And we don't really know exactly where the individual miners are, especially if they're using VPN and things like that. So it's a little bit more difficult. But the mining pools themselves, or the big ones like Riot Blockchain, which I'm familiar with here in Texas, you can just see exactly where they're at, and you can see that the hash rate is located in that country. And to me, I think to myself, it's a good question, because you said, is it an arms race between nations? And then when I think about it, I go, well, Riot Blockchain is not doing this for the U.S. government. Riot Blockchain is doing this for the people that invested into them. They're there to make money. It's a profit. It's a free market system. So that's why they're doing it. It's not so much like we're here for America or the Russian Federation. However, having said all that, there was an article that I read recently, and it said the Russian government is subsidizing crypto mining facility in Serbia. I'm taking a look right now. And what it talks about, the facility has 30,000 mining machines. They hire 100 workers, consumes 100 megawatts of power, and it's incentivized for zero land and property taxes to a lower income tax rate. That is by the Russian Federation. So in some way, shape, or form, the Russian government is going, you know what, we want you to do that. Now the question is, do they want them to do that because it is a hash rate war, or do they want to do that because they want to promote businesses just like how we do it here in America? Me personally, I mean, I could see why they'd want to do it. You did an excellent video yesterday, Guy, about BRICS and the waning power of the US dollar, and talked about Russia Federation, all those things. So to me, it would make sense, like, well, we want to go away from the dollar, so we also want to use an alternative currency, which could be used globally. So I can see that part. America, I think, just does not care. I think American miners doing it a little bit differently, but Russian miners in other places, perhaps.
Yeah. And of course, I guess Russia has, a lot of, I mean, especially at the moment, Russia has a lot of kind of excess energy, really. It's not able to sell to some of its biggest customers because of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions. China and India, I think, are taking what they can, but the infrastructure isn't there to really get it in the other direction. So
good point.
I guess they're sitting there with a lot of excess power, and well, what do? I guess you use it for something, and Russia certainly has, lots of space and with not very many people in it. So I guess there is the incentive there. Ben, what do you make of it? Do you think this is significant? The fact that Russia seems to be encouraging Bitcoin mining to an extent, or certainly is now the second largest country by miner, or is it not really all that relevant? Do you think?
Yeah, I don't really know if I have like a deep opinion on it, but I'd probably say it's interesting because the countries that are sort of leading in Bitcoin mining seem to change. I mean, it was China was one of the big ones not too long ago, and now that has gone to the wayside. And let's hope that doesn't happen to the United States, because we're still fighting other battles over here. But I would say in general, though, it's a trend towards what we've always seen in throughout the cycles, and that's for the hash rate to continue going higher. And it's probably just a sign of more things to come, right? More countries jumping in and contributing as well. I don't think that, like as you guys said, I don't really think the miners in the United States are going to be that concerned. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where in 2 to 3 years, the mining, the hash rate will likely be a lot higher than where it is today. I was looking, I pulled the chart up just before we came on here, and I was looking at the hash rate back in 2019. So we actually continue to push higher in 2019 and 2020. And really the main times where the hash rate goes down is after you hit major peaks. Where a lot of the, that's where you normally see it go down. But I mean, I guess to answer your question, I don't really necessarily see it as that big of a deal, but I do see it as just as an element of growing adoption throughout the world of Bitcoin in general, and we'll likely see more countries follow suit.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so, because I mean, I think it's been great to see miners setting up in other jurisdictions. Obviously, China kind of kicked them all out, and I mean, data up until Cambridge University used to track mining data quite well, and they don't seem to have done so for a while now. But I mean, for a long time, there seemed to be mining going on in China, even though the government there had banned it. But I mean, I think any sort of further decentralization of hash power in general is surely a good thing. I mean, leaving aside whatever your feelings may be about Russia or any kind of geopolitical thinking, I think the more decentralized Bitcoin mining can become, the more we can spread hash power all over the world, the better, really. And before we move on, I don't know if you guys saw this article from, it was a couple of weeks ago now. This was one, I looked at it and I wondered whether it was an early April Fool. It was on the 31st of March, but this was a major in the Space Force. who is arguing that the US government should really be encouraging mining operations, and it could be something for vital to US national security in the future. I thought that was quite an interesting article. It was all sort of part of a paper that he wrote in general, but that was kind of what prompted my question a little bit about, is this a potential a potential arms race in the making? We see countries competing over who can dominate the hash power.
Yeah, I will
Anyhow,
say, real quick, guy,
yes.
on that one. I will say it's interesting that you can say, like, the right to bear arms, and this is you're weaponizing Bitcoin. But didn't we here in America? I'm pretty sure we weaponized the dollar. We were able to weaponize that, and we use that quite convincingly around the world for power and influence. And now with all the different BRICS countries going, you know what, we want to use the yuan, we want to use the ruble, we want to use this. And everybody's going to start to intermingle and do all that commerce between themselves. My question was, and you questioned this on your videos, are they really going to trust these different currencies? Or are they going to say, you know what, I don't know if we trust all these things, but there's an alternative option, outside of this. So if you could just get ahead of that, if America could just, pull their head out of there, and really get ahead of things and go, well, this might actually work out pretty well, that would be the best thing for America to do. Right now they're screwing it up, but hopefully they move in that right direction. But I think it's a question to be asked, and hopefully they get it right. But it's government, so probably not.
Yeah, and I guess the big question is whether another government, whether somewhere like Russia or China or somewhere else is going to kind of wake up to it sooner and go, hey, this is a once in a generation opportunity to get the jump on everyone else, and really embrace this new technology. Hey, it could happen. It could happen. Anyway, let's move on then to some other sort of familiar territory. Obviously, yesterday was pretty intense, really, wasn't it? There was a lot going on. And before we touch on Shapella and Ethereum and all that, we had some more data, and we had some Fed minutes as well. So the big data was obviously the CPI print. It was generally positive, but there was a slight increase in the core CPI. Mm-hmm. So my question is there anything to suggest to either of you that the Fed could be about to change course? Obviously, plenty of people want to jump on the pause or pivot narrative at the earliest available opportunity and call for a new bull market, etc. Yeah, have your opinions changed? Either of you, Ben? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I was looking at it. It's interesting because they, for the first time, they acknowledged that we are likely heading towards a recession. And before, when you would hear Powell speak, or you would read the minutes, they wouldn't really talk too much about that, or they would say they think they can avoid it. But I believe, if I just quickly look for the sentence, it says that given their assessment of the potential economic effects of the recent banking sector developments, the staff's projection at the time of the March meeting included a mild recession starting later this year, with a recovery over the subsequent 2 years. So that's something interesting. But if you read the report, it still seems like they more so think that the risk is to inflation rather than, say, like the downside risk of going too high. So I think there's a good chance that the market is a little too optimistic on when rate cuts are going to come, especially within the context of equity valuations right now. So I think we'd have to ask ourselves, if the Fed continues to say that the risk is to the upside on inflation, and that's more concerning than than the potential downside risk of hiking too far, then we'd have to ask ourselves what possibly could happen within the next 2 months. Because I think if you go over to the CME, the cuts are expected as early as July. So what would have to happen between now and 3 months from now for the Fed to completely reverse course on their fight with inflation? And it would seem to me that something catastrophic would have to happen between now and then. So if we are going to get rate cuts, it's as soon as July, which I don't think is going to happen. But if we were, it would not be a good thing. It would be representative of something very awful happening for the Fed to want to really start to undo all the work they've done in combating inflation. With regards to headline CPI, we saw it drop from 6%, I believe, to 5%, which is a great drop. And we've talked about this before. We're more likely to see rapid disinflation as we continue to get further on into this year than we are to see hyperinflation, because it'll be courtesy of a recession, right? And recessions are great for bringing inflation down. I mean, they're not good for, they're not good for people that are of course wanting to keep their jobs, and obviously that's a painful process to go through. But they're great at bringing inflation down. If you look in the 40s, you look at every peak in inflation during the 70s, a recession is ultimately what brought inflation back down to earth. And I would say too that if for anyone who might be looking at the current peak on inflation and thinking that it was a lot lower than the 70s, the reason that is because they recalculated it, or they redid the methodology on how they calculate CPI. I believe, and I just sort of did if you do sort of a back of the envelope calculation, CPI essentially went to the same levels as it did in the 70s if you calculate it the same way that they used to calculate it back then. It's like recently they changed it again, right? I mean, if you change the methodology while you're running the experiment, you're going to have some pretty weird results, and you're not going to really be able to compare things. Imagine writing a thesis where you change your methodology halfway through and expect to publish those results to an audience that's going to accept that. Most reviewers would reject that, and they'd say, no, you need to run it the same way you ran it back then for these results to be meaningful. So I do think there's a lot of progress in headline CPI. The core CPI still leaves a lot to be desired in terms of bringing it back down. It still is relatively elevated month over month. It's not looking that great. I think a lot of that though is due to housing, which of course is a lagging indicator. So yeah, I mean, to sort of summarize, I think that, we might get one more 25 basis point rate hike, 2 at most. I think the terminal rate is somewhere between 5 to 5.5% for this rate hiking cycle. And then, once they get there, I think they're just going to hold. And I think they're probably going to hold until either late this year or early next year. I would prefer for them to hold until early next year, because the longer they hold, the more likely it is that they've actually, gotten rid of inflation. Because the bigger issue that we're going to be fighting 2 years from now, out in 2025, when hopefully Bitcoin is putting in new highs, is, where is inflation? Is it coming right back like the 70s and like the 40s? And if it does come back, then it could easily temper the sort of our expectations, or it should temper our expectations for theoretical returns if it comes back very quickly. Again, I mean, in the 70s, when we had a decade of high inflation, it was just slightly higher highs and slightly lower lows. So I'm hoping that they stay the course, as Powell says, until the job is done, until they see the white, until they see the white of our eyes, when we're like, wait, how are they not pivoting yet? Only then should they really pivot. So yeah, I mean, my general take is that they still are doing the right thing. They are acknowledging that a recession is likely coming, and it'll probably be here late this year or early next year at the latest.
Excellent answer. And Rob, I mean, do you feel the same? I mean, are you amazed that we haven't had a recession already?
I got to tell you, we all thought that the recession was coming like right around the corner, and here we are going, well, maybe next quarter. But there's a couple of things. First of all, Ben's right on that one aspect about inflation and coming out. But if we look at like that report that came out, and we talked about this, I talked about this yesterday in my video, and those Fed minutes, they talked about recessions coming. It'll be a mild recession. And that's okay, let's be honest, because if you have a recession, it kind of wipes away the inflation. It's kind of like a nice little reset. And they usually last around 10.5 months, and then we just bounce right back. It's a natural cycle for the market. So I don't think anybody should be really too scared about it. And actually, they should welcome it, because, again, once we come out stronger. But one of the things they said in the minutes was They go, look, this is going to happen. And then if we're taking a look at GDP growth in 2024, it'll probably be, at what we expect, or maybe a little bit lower. But in 2025, we expect to be much higher. And when I took a look at that, I'm like, that's awesome, because we talk about the 4-year cycles here a lot. And I just thought to myself, well, great, this is what I want. I want a recession to come in, a mild one, hopefully, not people lose their jobs. There's a reset in 2024, which, if we're looking at 4-year cycles, then that would equate to next year, what happens? The Bitcoin halving, right? Around March or April. And then usually what happens after that, 1 year in 2025, well, an all-time high. And that corresponds with exactly what the Fed is talking about. And I thought to myself, it's uncanny that these things line up perfectly, like with what they're talking about and what's happening. So when I look at things, I don't really care too much about the short term, like today's price, and everybody's freaking out about Ethereum. We're going to get to that in a second. I was like, I don't think it's really going to happen. Right now is not the thing to be focused on. What should be focused on is the long-term effects and what you're going to do and how you're going to combat that and your plan of action. And if you can just take a look at that and extrapolate that out to years, in 2025, I think a lot of us are going to be sitting pretty. And we're going to all be laughing about 2021 when we got in, the class of 2021, class of 2017, class of 2014. And look how awful that was. But look at where we're at now, baby. And when that time comes, when the all-time high hits, if it does, I'm not saying it is, the big question will be, can you take those profits that you think you should take, or are you going to fall victim to the same thing you did last time in 2021 and potentially in 2017? That is the big lesson moving forward. And then lastly, I'll just say about inflation and the terminal rate. I was watching Dave Lynn. He's got a great channel, and he had Steve Hanke on. And Steve Hanke is a professor at Johns Hopkins University and an economist. And he talked about, and it was the first time I've heard people really just talk about this, it was all about the money supply. He said the money supply is the overall arching thing of why we have inflation. And he said all the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. Just look at the money supply. And I remember what he said and what economists, Nobel Prize winner Milton Friedman said, which was the same thing. Just keep it simple. It's all about money supply. When money supply goes up, inflation goes up. When money supply retracts, inflation goes down. And Hanke said, he goes, we called this a couple months ago. We say inflation is dead. And he took a look at M2 money supply, and he was right. And there was, if you can look at the Fred data, if you take a look at month over month, percentage-wise, and he also took a look at the bank credit, all commercial banks, and how that's actually decreasing too, which would be a part of the money supply, is they just, fractionalize reserve lending. So I took a look at those two things. He's like, and he was like, this dead. Now, I can agree with him on that one. Unfortunately, he hates Bitcoin, but hey, not everybody's perfect. So on that one, I'm feeling pretty good, quite honestly, about the markets.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of comfort in certainty, isn't there? And as you say, it kind of seems to be playing out as we sort of thought it would. I just want to check the CME, the FedWatch tool, if we can bring that up and see what the expectations are for the meeting in 20 days' time. And yeah, that seems to show pretty firm consensus that we're going to get another rate rise come then. So yeah, it certainly seems that it's following a plan in a way. Well, not a plan, but it seems to be playing out as many imagined it would. And yeah, I thought the minutes in particular were particularly revealing. Reuters flagged up one thing that some Fed officials had considered pausing, but even they concluded high inflation remained so paramount that they pressed on with a rate hike despite the risk. And this was obviously because of the banking crisis and stuff, and showed that it had spooked some people. But I think we discussed this in the last stream, or maybe the one previous to that, didn't we? But that opportunity kind of came for the Fed to pause with the banking crisis, and they held firm. So I don't see any reason why that won't continue next month. Okay, let's move on then to the big crypto story of the moment, and that is, as I said earlier, fortunately a good one. Shapella went ahead very smoothly yesterday. I don't think there were any hitches at all. I think I think you'd have had to be pretty bearish on Ethereum and crypto in general to imagine that there would have been a hitch from a technical perspective. And obviously, a lot of people were worried that lots of validators would unstake and we would have lots of unstaked ETH and staking rewards hitting the market. That didn't really happen. And of course, just as we started the stream, ETH breached 2K for the first time in a while. So my question is, I'll start with you, Ben. Has obviously, as you said last time, you're not looking to buy any ETH at the moment, but has the events of the last sort of 24 hours or so, has that changed your stance on ETH at all? Are you optimistic about the future? Obviously, we've got another upgrade coming I think it's end of the year. It's supposed to be, and does any kind of talk of regulators, the SEC and others, does that worry you at all?
So no. So yeah, I mean, the reason to answer your first question, I am, of course, long-term bullish on Ethereum. I don't really think there is a such thing as an ETH killer. I think that Ethereum will retain its number 2 spot for years to come. But that's what I mean, number 2. It's not number 1, and I don't think it's going to be number 1. And the reason why I continue to push back on it is it's not. It's more so based on its rather constant devaluation against Bitcoin. My main concern right now, and this narrative goes back all the way back to the merge in 2022 and beyond that as well, is that while the tokenomics are going to make it so that it outperforms Bitcoin, and because going to being deflationary, right? The idea is, all right, well, now it's going to become number 1 in crypto. It's going to outperform Bitcoin. I think the market has quite handily refuted that argument, as the merge was in fact a lower high for the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, as compared to where it actually peaked back in December of 2021. So the reason why I'm still not getting Ethereum is because I think you have to think about the opportunity cost. $1 into the cryptoverse should go to the least risky asset, if also you expect that least risky asset to outperform the riskier assets. If I think the riskier assets are going to outperform, then I would put dollars towards those. But I still only see, it has not changed my opinion on it right now, because I can't look at the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation and see anything other than one lower high after another that really started that really started back in 2021, right? I mean, and the merge was really just another lower high. So, I know people are optimistic about it, and I can't wait to take off my maxi hat and join in on with the ETH bulls. But I can't with a clear conscience come out and be bullish on the ETH Bitcoin valuation, when to me it just looks like a massive distribution phase, in the 0.07 to 0.08 range. And look, I mean, we Ethereum has seasonality, and I actually talked about this on your channel over the weekend or on Monday, where it often does hold up somewhat okay in Q1 and Q2, but then a lot of that fades by like the May to June timeframe. And so I think that's what's going to happen again. I think the ETH Bitcoin valuation will fade back to the downside as we get into May, June, July, August, and September. And I think that the time to potentially find a potential bottom on the Ether Bitcoin pair is likely not until the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year. I mean, that's essentially where it bottomed out in 2019. And if we want to go with the cyclical nature of crypto, then why should I assume this time is going to be any different? I think the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has further to fall. And part of that is going back to your question. It could be due to regulatory concerns. I hope that Ethereum is considered a commodity, but what I hope and what actually happens are two very different things. We need to remember that, right? We hoped that Bitcoin would go to 100K. It didn't mean it went to 100K, right? So I hope that I feel like I know that Bitcoin's a commodity. I think Ethereum could be, but I don't know yet. And until I know, or let me say this, until I know, or until the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation devalues to the levels that I want it to, that's the point that I would actually become more interested in Ethereum. And until that time, I think you're going to see the fairly consistent devaluation of the Ether Bitcoin pair. I know it's up today, and I woke up this morning and had countless messages about how the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is up 3%, and I'm like, oh, congratulations! It's rallied to where it was 4 days ago. It doesn't change the fact that it's been putting in one lower high after another, and I mean, I know. Maybe you guys don't share this opinion, right? But that's the great thing about the show, right? We should have dissenting opinions on some of this stuff to make it interesting. So yeah, I do think that it has not changed my stance. I think that Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation will continue to bleed for probably at least another 6 months or so. And bear market rallies aside on it, but I do think it will continue to bleed. I think that, yeah, you could have some type of regulatory risk coming. The thing is one of the things I've said many times as well is one of the bigger risks, I think, to crypto right now. The biggest risk is not the regulation risk, right? I mean, the regulation risk is not going to hit Bitcoin anyways, right? I mean, it's, Bitcoin, it's not going to really matter. The main risk is do we go into an economic downturn, right? Do we actually go into a recession, or even do we get close to a recession? During prior periods where we had recession scares, the market still went down, even when we didn't have a recession. So I think that's the bigger risk to risk assets right now, and I actually think there's plenty of reasons to be worried about that, but I won't go into that.
Nice. And Rob, I want to ask you a hypothetical question as well, just for the hell of it. So just thinking if yesterday had kind of all gone wrong and, maybe the upgrade hadn't gone according to plan, or maybe there had been, the maximum amount of unstaking allowed, and we had seen that ETH hitting the market and ETH's price had taken a tumble. Do you think would that have dented your confidence in it, or would you have seen that as a buying opportunity?
No. Well, I mean, dented in the confidence in the short term, sure, but in the long term, probably not. I will tell you this though, if that did happen, Ben would have been able to wake up bright and early with the 4 kids, check the Twitter, gloat about how Bitcoin dominance is up and how Ethereum and everything is bleeding, and it'd been a sweet day for Ben. But but I mean, it worked out pretty well, and I'll hand it to the Ethereum Foundation and the developers for doing a great job, because they did it for everybody to watch. And it, like someone gave an analogy, it's kind of like changing an engine down the highway as it's running down, and that wasn't easy. So I tip my hat to them. But I will say, what Ben talked about, and Guy, I know you've said this in the past. This is where we all differ. This is where we all differ about where we want to do things and how we want to invest. And that's okay. It's okay to have a dissenting opinion. I will tell you, like, when I take a look at how things bleed and how things are, the valuations, yes, we can see that things are not holding up too well to Bitcoin. Over time, doesn't really, it tends to say that way. But usually what happens, it goes from Bitcoin, then down to the alts, and then down to like the micro caps, and people do all their degenerate gambling nonsense, and then it goes right back to Bitcoin. But the question then is, and Ben brought this up, is it works out pretty well in the first 2 quarters, and then in third quarter starts to slip, and then fourth quarter, which I will tell you, remember the old adage, sell in May and go away? It has been ringing in my brain for the last 3 months. And it's making me really start to think about how much profits I will have to take in May, or will take in May, because who knows, there's a collapse coming, especially with all the news of a mild recession hitting. Once that news comes, then the people who are not well-versed will like, oh my God, a recession's here. then the whole thing's going to collapse. I got to sell right now and I got to hunker down and things like that. Let those people do that and let the prices drop if that actually does happen. Because then what happens for me, not for you guys, but for me, the dollar cost average machine still keeps working in the background. I still keep picking up Bitcoin daily and Ethereum daily and some alts daily. And I know the way that I potentially could do it would be just to stop all the alts, put it all in the Bitcoin, save up my money. And then on the day when it drops to some magical level, then I'm going to put my money into. I cannot do that. I'm just going to tell you right now.
Man, Rob, man, I should have thought that idea.
That's a great plan, but it is impossible to do for me because, like, I know when I'm sitting on a bunch of cash, for me to go heavy all in. And somebody asked me this question, like, Rob, why didn't you go heavy when Bitcoin went down to 15,600? And I was like, well, it's the same reason I didn't go heavy when it went from 25,000 to 23,000, then to 20, then to 17, because I don't know how flow it's going to go. I personally thought it was going to go around 12K, and I was wrong, but 15.6. So to me, I just look at it like this. I did the same thing in 2017 and 2018. It worked out pretty well. I didn't know where things were going. I just kept dollar cost averaging in. Some didn't make it, but some did. You're going to screw up. You're not going to get into the right project, but I'm just going to spread things around. The ones that do make it, they take care of all the other losers that I had. And I don't have to be the champion of 10 different altcoins, just 2 or 3. And that's it. So that's where we differ. And I'm okay with that.
Good. I'm happy you're happy.
I'm happy, man. I'm happy because who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's that wonderful. It's that thing, isn't it? People so often deploy this kind of just deploy hindsight, don't they? And it's like, well, yeah. Why didn't you buy then? It's like, because I thought it would go lower. It's a simple answer to a kind of silly question, really. Anyhow, let's move on because I want to talk a bit about a bit more macro. So I don't think anyone can really have missed all the hype that seems to be building at the moment around Asia. Obviously, we have Hong Kong legalizing crypto trading in this summer, so a couple of months from now. And there's just so much chatter out there in the cryptoverse about Hong Kong and kind of Asia in general. And just anecdotally, from speaking to a couple of people just last week who are very familiar with the Asian market, they were telling me during some of these recent pumps that we've seen, for instance, with Doge and XRP and others, but an enormous amount of trading volume for those was coming from Asian exchanges, particularly in South Korea, where apparently they're absolutely crypto crazy, kind of next level crypto crazy. Anyhow. So the talk around Asia becoming the next big crypto hub is getting louder. So my question is the only way to change the US government's mind on this to watch a brain drain, to watch crypto developers and crypto companies, and of course investment, crypto money as well, head away from the US and over to places like Asia? And will that be enough, do you think, to sort of convince the US government to switch course? Rob, do you want to lead off on that?
Yeah, the answer is no. And the answer is no, because the people that are in charge or in power right now, you can look at it 2 different ways. You can just say that they're bought and paid for, because that's what a lot of people do believe. Or you can just look at it that their convictions are so strong that they believe they're doing the right thing. I take a look at Gary Gensler, and sometimes people say, like, he's the Antichrist and he's like the worst thing of all time and he's bought and paid for. Yeah, perhaps. But also, he's been very clear that he is here to protect the consumer. Now, before everybody groans and say, well, that's awful, and how can you talk about that? In some parts he's right. And of course people will hate me, but he's right. He was right on not on FTX, but about the commingling of funds. He goes, we got to stop that. Unfortunately, he said it after FTX and Celsius and Voyager all went down, but whatever. So like when I see all these things happening in the background, I think to myself, is the government going to step in and say, you know what, we care about a brain drain, we care about these things moving overseas? No, they're not, because they just don't get it. And you don't have to look any further than just take a look at any interview with Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, when she says, I'm going to build an anti-crypto army and essentially try to crush crypto because I believe it's hurting people. Crypto's not hurting people. It's the crappy exchanges that went afoul of the situation and screwed everybody over. That's the thing that she should be focused on, not the crypto projects themselves. And then lastly, I will say this about, the Asia and all the traders that are out there. There was a report from Citigroup. It's the 11th largest bank in the world, third largest bank in the United States. And they talked about a lot of things that are happening for crypto moving forward is gaming. And there was also a report that came out. It was a blog post, exploiting numbers, and they took a lot from Statista, and just took a look at gamers in general. I don't know what the world population is, around 7-8 billion, somewhere around there, 8 point something billion. When they took a look at this, as far as like gaming, they said gamers worldwide, there's around 3.1 billion gamers. And that's not like hardcore gamers, that's like casual gamers, because think of all the people that have one of these things, these cell phones, and they just casual game. They said the majority of the people concentrating for gaming, it's in Asian countries at 1.5 billion. So half of all gamers are essentially in the Asian countries. We see a lot of volume over there. So if you're going to look into any kind of sector where things are going to grow, I think it's probably going to be Web3 gaming and moving in that direction. So when I see like that, and the project that we're bringing forward, we're heavily focused on Asian countries. We don't really care too much about the United States as far as that goes. So.
And Ben, what about you? I mean, do you think there's any hope for the US, or has the ship already sailed, or is it, kind of getting underway as we speak?
I think a lot of people already have left. I think there's actually I think a lot of companies, went overseas already, or what could have been American companies were not, just because people don't want to deal with it. I mean, there's been plenty of crypto companies already started to close down. Their sort of their American side of things, and who can blame them, right? Who wants to deal with it? Right? Like, it's hard to even get banked as a crypto company. I mean, imagine dealing with. I think the issue with the United States is that there's no clarity on what you can and cannot do. They say you should go register, but I mean, I think some of them have tried, and there's just no really great way to do that. So I don't really think that seeing the companies go other places is what's going to change their mind. I think a lot of them, their mind's already made up. I think what might change people's mind, or maybe not change their mind. Look, the reality of the situation is that oftentimes, in order to see a lot of new policy take place, you just have to get new people into office that actually care about the changes, right? You're not going to change someone's mind. You're not going to go out and change Elizabeth Warren's mind about whether she should be pro crypto or not. Like, her mind is made up. It was made up a long time ago. The only way that we see any change, I think, is the voting base. So the people that care about this industry, they vote for the people that are going to sort of have have the backs of the cryptoverse, and to not just tear it down. So yeah, I don't think the brain drain is going to convince them. I think what will lead to better policy for crypto is just getting new people into office that care. And think about it, like, a lot of people that are much older than us don't care about crypto, right? A lot of them don't. Yeah. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't really blame them. Like, I think it's natural to if you don't understand something, like, you just kind of ignore it, right? Like, who didn't go over to their grandparents' house growing up, and they didn't have the internet, even though they could have, right? Like, they could have had it, but they didn't have it because, well, they never had it for the first 60 years of their life, and they don't know it, they don't need to know it, and so they just ignore it. But the people now, like, a lot of people now, they're growing up in the sort of this digital age, right? Like, I was at my first graders school for this spring event not too long ago, and one of the kids saw my shirt, and it said dubious speculation with the B was the Bitcoin logo, and they told me they liked my shirt, and it was an elementary school kid. that's the future, right? Like that's the future of crypto. The younger generation, which actually grows up with this stuff, and those people that appreciate it. I was listening right before this. I was listening to some of the things that Warren Buffett said about the .com era in the 2000 in 1999 actually, and one of the things he said was he actually I think was bullish on the internet long term. Like I mean I think he recognized that it would likely change our world, but he also recognized that there was going to be a lot of growing pains because there's the asset there's the innovation part, but you also have to have profitable companies. Like you can't just have companies that are just throwing up a pets.com type website and trying to ride that wave. You actually need profitable companies to take it to new heights. And I think that's what makes crypto look like a joke to a lot of people, because there are profitable companies, but there's also a ton of scams, like a ton of them. And it seems like every other day on Twitter, there's some new person that is rugging their audience, right? In whether it's the NFT world, whether it's, and it's just like a daily occurrence. So you can't really help but understand why some of these people hold the views that they do. I think the answer is we need to get newer, other people into office eventually. It's going to take time. And the other thing we can do is try to just make the cryptoverse a better place where it's not just running as rampant with all these scams and trying to help educate people like, hey, like don't fall for this because the same stuff happens over and over and over again, right? Just because your microcap went up 20x last weekend doesn't mean it's going to hold those gains forever.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is hearts and minds, especially from the point of view of people like us, isn't it? Just got to educate people and try and show them the right way to do things. And yeah, I guess you're both right, aren't you? I mean, the only way really that the US is going to change its stance to crypto is if you get new people coming in. And I mean, I think I kind of operated for a while thinking, well, okay, this current administration is clearly very anti-crypto, but of course, if we see a Republican administration come in next year, then that could obviously change things up a bit. But then I sort of realized it's like, well, without getting too deep into the politics of it, because I know that's a minefield, but that is not guaranteed, is it? I think a lot of people kind of assume that. So that Trump will secure the Republican nomination and then he'll romp to a victory, and sure that could happen. And obviously a lot of people are very dissatisfied with the current government, but it's by no means nailed on. So we could be we could be stuck with what you've got over there for a while yet. So yeah, and I guess is there a chance that crypto can become enough of an issue to change the conversation for many people? And I guess you could argue perhaps not, because there are things like inflation, things like the cost of living are quite rightly a lot bigger, a lot more of a worry for a lot more people.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that's why like I remember in 2017 when I got in, a lot of the YouTubers and people on Twitter, not a lot, but there's a good amount, they're just not here anymore because they made the funds. They're like, well, that's good, and they're out, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want to do. But I think it's important that like you two guys, you guys have a great channel. You guys put out consistently good data and information, and they don't steer things. Like that's the thing I think that will help us move forward, as opposed to here's the next 1000x ridiculous coin, invest into this and get rug pulled. But yeah, I think hopefully you guys stick around. I don't know about me, but hopefully you guys can stick around. My plan is, next bull run, I'm going to talk about it, and then as things start to fade away, I'm going to start to say, okay, this is my plan. This is what I did, and now it's up to you to decide. And I'm going to hopefully the type I can sit out for a bit until the next bear market comes and say, see, now it's a time to build. That's the plan.
Run off into the sunset, right?
Run off into the sunset, but then come back as things like the 2019, 2022s and go, okay, everybody, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what people do. I'm going to come back in the bear market and go, okay, now it's the same thing again. Time to start building. Did you learn your lesson? Here's what's going to happen again. This is what we see.
Yeah.
I guess in 2026 we should all just take a break for a year.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I'm hoping we'll have, but who knows? No one's got a crystal ball.
It'll be too exciting. It'll be too exciting. There'll be so much more new cool stuff, and we'll go. Hey, didn't we say we were going to take a break this year? Are we going to take it? No. There's another Ethereum upgrade coming up. We got to cover it.
Yeah. Did you see Warren Buffett coin came out? I can't believe he did it. Yeah.
He finally got orange pilled at the age of 104 or whatever it will be. Okay, and one other thing we were getting excited about, just to finish off quickly, there was that lovely story last week, I think it was, about the Bitcoin white paper being found on all kind of post 2018 Apple devices, which was just great. A bit of unashamed good news. But it did get me thinking about kind of big tech in general, and there's been so much speculation over the years, hasn't there, about big tech kind of adopting crypto and fueling the next bull run. And we've had kind of false starts with it, I guess. I suppose Tesla's the best example. I remember, Bitcoin went on a tear when Tesla announced that it was buying, and of course Tesla then sold not all that long ago. So my question is this idea of big tech adopting crypto, is that something we should be hoping for? Or should we just, as an industry, just be do we need that? Should we just be getting on with it rather than waiting for, the likes of Amazon and Apple and Tesla and Google and all these others, these Johnny-come-latelys? Should we be worrying about them at all? Rob, what do you think?
Worried about them? No, but I mean, look, I was talking to Tyler Spalding. He's the founder of Flexa and AMP Token. And he's been in the payment space since like the late 90s. And he has been in Bitcoin since crypto Bitcoin 2011. And he's has active conversations with a lot of these big companies. And he's got active conversations with a lot of the banks. And he said, and I'm not going to publish this part, but he just said to us after the show, he goes, I got to tell you, I've been talking to a lot of different places as far as like the payments and the big box companies. They go, it's not that they don't want to be in, it's that they are worried about the risk and the hacks and the things that are going on, because they have to be safe for their customers and they have to be right for, as far as like if you're a bank and regulation and payment processing, because if you lose everybody's money, like in all the hacks that we have, then where are you? Your business is sunk. So he's like, as things move forward, I see more and more interest. There's a lot of interest out there. They want to do it. They just are waiting for the right time. And so should we wait for them? No, because usually, the ones that are the most successful, the ones that have the most revenue, are the ones that get in early. But you got to kiss a lot of frogs to get that prince, right? But you're going to be hurting for a lot of the parties that just aren't going to make it. But with the ones that do, they should do pretty well. Not financial advice.
Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think we should worry about it. I think we spent a lot of time worrying about that in 2021, and I mean, I think a lot fewer companies actually bought than I think we were hoping for. So yeah, probably don't worry about it, but I think it's going to happen. I mean, I think a lot of them will eventually integrate into. I mean, they might not just go out and make some type of sensationalist buy like Tesla did, but I do think you will see crypto continue to integrate itself throughout our society, not only in big tech, but also in other places as well, is my guess. So yeah, I think it will happen, and I think it's just a part of the adoption of crypto over the long haul. We just have to remember that these things take years, right? Like it takes a long time, and then you blink, and then one day you wake up, and it's like you can't ever. Like everything is integrated, like everything's integrated into the internet, right? But like 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. 30 years from now, crypto might be integrated into everything, and it might be hard to imagine life without it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's always that tipping point, not necessarily tipping point, but there was that point of adoption where, you really know it's arrived when people are using it without even realizing that they're using it. That's when it's truly, we've truly reached that point. Okay, we're almost done. I just want to give the floor to a couple of questions, if that's all right. I know we started a bit late because of my habitual technical incompetence. So we had an interesting question from Phil, and I was curious to see what you guys would make of this. When inflation eventually comes down, do you expect prices to actually come down too? What do you reckon on that, Ben?
It's hard to say because normally prices go up and then they stay there. It's not, if inflation comes down, it doesn't mean that prices are going down. It just means they're not going up as quickly. The way they go down is if we get into a period of deflation, there is a possibility of that happening. If you look at it's kind of a scary chart. If you look at the year-over-year change in M2, it's going down pretty quickly. But sort of the counterpoint to that is, well, it also went up really quickly in 2020. And if you look at this sort of longer arching trend line, we're so far above it that we kind of have a lot of excess out there that can be sort of absorbed back in. So, I think it's probably more likely that a lot of things might just stay. So like the real estate market will probably come back down some. Valuations of some companies could come back down. But if you're talking about like going to the grocery store and buying a gallon of milk or some of that stuff, like it might not go back down to where it was, right? Like it might just continue to stay at those more elevated prices, and it'll just simply be, like the new normal.
Yeah, very true. Rob?
Yeah, I just think that a lot of companies they'll keep their prices a little bit higher because it's all about the ranges and the profit margins. So like oil companies are famous for this, right? When they'll raise the prices, but then their actual cost of production, transportation, everything else in between, or their what they have to pay for those services and oil itself to get it out and get to you. The profit margin should be, let's say it's like $1. But then as the prices start to raise, they go, well, our profit margin now is $2, but we're not going to lower the actual price because we're making a lot of money for a bit. So again, profit margin. And if that goes up, but that's just the free market. So it's going to happen for a bit. Ben talks about disinflation. Prices could go down, but then as far as like manufacturing costs, but they might keep it higher for a little bit longer, just so they can keep some profits and go from there.
Yeah. And Rob, one more question that I know you'll want to refute, but scandalous allegations in the comments from earlier. Can you just confirm or deny that is the case?
I'm telling you. Doge could be the next big one. It's either between Doge or Shiba Inu. One of those is going to be. It's going to flip Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure. That is sarcasm, everybody.
Yeah, not financial advice either. But
the worst.
Yeah,
someone needs to clip that on Twitter and just ignore the.
Exactly. You know it's coming. It's coming. Deepfakes are coming.
Yeah,
they're here.
Yeah,
they're already here to some degree.
Oh, you know what? Before we go on, Tyler Spalding was talking about this. He thinks deepfakes are the next big thing, and he says the only way to be able to distinguish that between a deepfake, like Ben saying, "Hey, Shiba Inu to the moon, everybody follow me on my new Telegram," and then get ripped off. There's a way to do that as far as like with blockchain and smart contracts, and actually be able to authenticate that. Wouldn't that be interesting to actually have that out there? And that's the real use case for blockchain, is to authenticate. Like, President Zelensky comes on and goes, "We surrender to Russia." Everybody, put their arms down, and people believe it. And then, but they're like, "Oh, well, there's an authenticator right here using blockchain tech." That would be just a little tangent off there.
Yeah, truth is perhaps going to become the ultimate commodity in the future. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Ben, Rob, thank you very much. It was great to have you here on Coin Bureau Clips. Can I remind everyone just again to subscribe to Ben? That is his channel there at Into the Cryptoverse. Rob, meanwhile, is here at Digital Asset News. So we will be back next week. Who's hosting next week?
We should be back on my channel next week.
Okay. Okay. So we will be there at Into the Cryptoverse. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate your comments and questions, and appreciate your spending your Thursday morning, afternoon, evening, night with us. Gents, it's been a pleasure as always. I will see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you.